Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Hi, this is Tim Mooney, and welcome to Pedalshift Live. I am just doing a little bit of pre-show kind of checks here. It looks like everything is broadcasting okay, so I can pause myself. A little bit of sausage making here. I like to check to make sure that the feed's actually working before things get going. So I have it playing, so I see my face pop up on my screen down here. And then I immediately shut it off because that's distracting AF. I'm just here to tell you, to have your own face broadcast back at you. I don't know if the pros feel the same way. Thanks so much for joining. We're doing the live show a little bit more closely in time than I think I anticipated. Largely just happenstance. The big thing is I kind of like using these to announce the brand new tours that I've got going. And since my next tour is a big one, and it's starting about a month from tomorrow, give or take. I haven't quite figured that exact element of it out. I thought this was a really good chance to do the announcement and do another live show. So thank you for coming. Thanks everybody who voted for making this Sunday early evening, late afternoon, depending on where you're at, or morning, or I don't know. I don't know where you are in the world, but thanks for voting and making your voices heard, because I think that's helpful and awesome. I will probably keep doing that going forward, just to try to get some more folks in, and we already are starting with more people than we normally do. So that is awesome. Thank you so much. I don't know how long the show is going to go. I think we're looking at probably a nice tight hour when all is said and done with all the rambling that's going on. I am, again, here in D.C., as you may be able to tell. I don't know. Can you tell the difference between when I'm doing it in West Virginia and D.C.? Maybe. The plant's a dead giveaway. I have no plants in West Virginia. I don't know why. Well, no, I know why. Because I'm not there often enough to water them. So, plants here, they tend to make it. So if you see a plant, it's very likely to be in DC. One thing that I do want to throw out at you, for those of you who have joined the live show, especially since the first one, there's a solid chance for a pug brawl. I have 3 pugs in here, 2 of which are mortal enemies, it's turning out, and they're becoming more and more mortal enemies over time, which is kind of funny if you're not me, I think. But yeah, they tend to go at each other. I got one on the other side of the camera from where you're at right now, and I got one right here. The chill one, Bellstar, the bike touring one, she's never a problem. Although, you know what's weird? She'll jump in the middle of it. I don't understand that. She just wants a scrap, but she doesn't want to take sides, so she'll just attack whoever's there. I don't understand that. Anyways, the reason why I bring it up is because it is entirely possible we could get a pug scrap, in which case I'm going to have to throw microphones aside and pull dogs apart, throw one in a crate, and I'm just hoping that doesn't happen. They're asleep at the moment, but it has not been a very solid weekend. My girlfriend is away, and yeah, I'm dealing with the pug scraps myself. Hoping this doesn't happen. Hoping this doesn't ruin your podcast enjoyment, but it can happen. So if you're new to the live show, welcome to the possibility of pug brawls. It's only happened once, but I feel like I need to mention it every time. Let's see. I'm curious where everybody's joining from. You can do that if you are in the YouTube channel. If you're at pedalshift.net/live, you won't have the opportunity to use the chat box. So hit the thing inside the thing that's playing and go to the YouTube channel. You'll be able to participate in the live chat. That can be important just to have a little bit of ability to say hi, throw some questions out there, especially during the AMA session, which we're going to do on the latter half of the show. Also to say hello to each other, but most importantly right now, tell me where you're coming in from. We got CC from Ireland. Hello, 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 CC. That's an out of the box. Yes. Trying to do the math here. It's late. You're like 11 p.m. midnight-ish. Got Frosty Pittsburgh from Jay Daly. We got the TO Toronto from Paul Young. Just happened through the live feeds notification. Well, hey dude, welcome man. I'm a fan of Toronto. I grew up across the lake from there. Occasionally you'll hear me slip into your fine accent from time to time, just because that's how I do it. Yeah, Ireland, 11 p.m. in case you were wondering. Don't even have to Google it. That's what this show is all about. So if you're new to the show, which at least some of you are, this is all about bicycle touring. I'm going to be announcing my next big tour. We're going to be going, also doing a little Ask Me Anything about bike touring. And frankly, because it's an AMA, you can ask me other questions too. I am utterly unqualified to answer many questions, but you can ask them and I can tell you if I feel like I'm unqualified. I was good with the Star Wars questions. I think last time we had that Stones Beatles questions. I don't have a non-bike touring question of the emailed in ones. So we've got room for one is all I'm saying. So let me just check in. A bunch of you have chimed in. We've got New England. We've got Interstate 25 in Albuquerque. Just arrived for a week vacation. A week vacation in Albuquerque. Solid spot. Love New Mexico. Detroit. Greg Middlemiss. Greg, my family is from Detroit. I can do the hand thing. I can do that all. Welcome. Let's see. We got the Philly area, and we've got Colorado from, oh, my girlfriend chimes in. She is in Colorado right now. Hello. Hello, Colorado. Columbus, Ohio, Chris Barron. Chris, every time I see your name, I keep thinking of when I was on the Sprocket the last time when it was Chris Barron, Chris Barron, and Chris Barron. And I kept just saying, and Chris Barron. I don't know why I'm very amused by myself on that, which is probably not a good idea. From Miami, Oklahoma, or, nope, I mispronounced it. If it's in the Oklahoma variety, if it's, oh, Kimberly, help me out. Is it Miami? Miami, I think? Kimberly, my girlfriend, is from Oklahoma and schooled me on that. So yes, Oklahoma, I know you very well. All right, everyone. Well, the way this all goes is we do the late banter. That's what we're doing right now. If you've got questions, and I've already seen one, let's see, CC in Ireland, any knowledge on birdie fold-up bikes on tour? Remind me if I don't answer that, but folding bikes I know a little bit about on tour. Of course, I've ridden two different types of bikes. I haven't ridden a birdie fold-up, so I can talk a little bit about that during the AMA, but throw some questions at me as we get closer to the AMA, and we can kind of do it all that way. Again, one of the elements about all of this is, I talk about this as the sausage making of podcasts. So you're kind of here while I produce the show that's going to be this Thursday show. So you and I are going to be talking here on the camera. There are going to be times when I'm going to be kind of looking down at my show notes, so don't be distracted by that. It's not super ideal. I'll try to talk to you as much as I can. But also, there's going to be opportunities to kind of interact. So we'll just kind of throw this all out there. Let's see, Kimberly Miami. I think it's Miami. Okay, well, my Oklahoma cred is terrible, folks. I've said this before. I've gone to Garth Brooks shows. In fact, I'm using my Garth Brooks cozy here. The first or second time I went to a Garth Brooks show with Kimberly, I looked at her. I said, I feel like I may as well be on Mars, just because, no disrespect, but like, it is not my upbringing, the whole Oklahoma thing. I grew up in Western New York, across from TO, as I talked about before. So I'm still learning, man. So not Miami, but Miami. I'll try that. Okay, so anyways, folks, the beer tonight is the New Belgium Brut IPA out of Colorado, actually the same town as our Steve from our beginner series. So interestingly enough, I think they've stolen the Pedalshift logo. That looks suspiciously like the orange and the circle. So, you know, what you're going to do. I guess I don't own circles. So that kind of makes sense. All right, so I wanted to catch up a little bit before we get started on the show. Oh, one other thing I do when I do the show is, because I care about audio for your listening pleasure, people, I do a little bit of a capture a little bit of room noise, so do a little pause before I get going to capture that so I can remove said room noise. So we'll get to that in a moment, but I want to catch up with some of you in the chat room right here. Let's see. I've gotten my Oklahoma stuff out of the way. Jim from St. Charles, Missouri Cage Trail. Yes, I know your town very well. I ended my tour. Well, I guess I didn't really end it because I crossed the river and I ended up at wherever the train station is, and you'll have to forgive me, I can't remember the name of the town. But yeah, St. Charles, awesome. Paul Young watched the Great Ride last night. Gap C&O on my list. Is April 15th too early? Paul, it is not. It's a little on the early side. Let's see here. It's March 31st. The good news is that trail conditions are pretty good. I actually have an AMA question that's asking about the status of the C&O, so hang tight on that. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. I would say it's never too early, depending on the type of bike you want to do and the type of conditions you want to ride in. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And Brian Bechtel says copyright infringement from the good folks at New Belgium. I'll let you be the judge. You know the Pedalshift logo. I'm just saying that's suspicious. That's a suspicious circle right there, an orange circle. I don't care. I do not own orange circles. All right, so here's how we're going to do it. We're going to do a little bit of pause, capture that room noise. thank you all for joining. We're already above, we're breaking records. We're breaking early in the live show records for numbers of people here. So thank you so much for joining from literally all around the world. This is super humbling. 160th episode, and yeah, it's awesome. And just by saying that, I've lost somebody. So there you go. Okay. A little bit of room noise capture, and we'll jump right into the show. Thank you for joining. Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride, let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are at pedalshift.net/160, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshift.net or call the voicemail hotline 202-930-1109 and check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Hello to everybody on YouTube. Hello to everybody on the podcast. We are live, baby, live from Washington, D.C. for the 160th episode of the Pedalshift Project. Thank you so much for joining. On this episode, we're going to cover a little bit of our usual housekeeping. We're going to reveal the brand new spring tour that I'm super excited to talk about. But I will have to say, I almost changed it completely today. But I stayed. I decided to stick. I came very close to making a major change that would have required me to change the end of my tour, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But anyways, we're sticking tight. I decided against that. So tour announcement that is definitely going to happen. At least the intention is going to happen. And then we're going to go into an Ask Me Anything segment as well. I just want to scroll through. Oh, I have a little surprise segment in there as well. So let's just get cracking. Okay, this is when I get to take a sip of beer. If you've joined the live show, you know when I do one of these things, it is impossible for me to actually have a chance to take a sip. So here we go. CC in Ireland, any good recommendations on podcasts you listen to? Okay, first and foremost, everybody repeat after me. The Sprocket Podcast, which is sort of the cousin of this show. Lots of bikey stuff, lots of infrastructure stuff. They're based in Portland. It's a very Portland-centric show. Portland, Oregon, of course. Totally recommend it. I really like the Pathless Pedaled. Russ is awesome. He does some really good stuff, and really good bikey stuff. Those are sort of the two that I just say sort of off the top of my head. There's also some really interesting YouTube channels that I've been running into lately, and I think I'm going to do a whole show maybe around that, but keep an ear open for that. But the sprocketpodcast.com, definitely recommend. Okay, one more sip. Of course, this all gets cut out of the podcast. You know that, right? Okay. All right, first up on the show is the housekeeping section, and that is where I'm just going to throw out all the different things that are happening upcoming. The big thing to put on your calendar, mark your calendars, Portland, Oregon, Pedalpalooza, Friday, June 14th. We are doing the Podcast Palooza ride, and that's going to be in conjunction with the Sprocket Podcast, the Joyride Podcast, and much more. Details are going to be coming later on this spring, but mark the calendars. If you are in Portland or Portland adjacent, or if you're Portland curious, this would be a chance for you to come, and we're going to be doing some recording. It's somehow going to end up in a podcast episode. I think the guys on the Sprocket on the last episode said we really haven't figured this out. I'm here to tell you we have not figured this out yet, but it's going to be awesome. We just don't know how awesome yet. So come join us June 14th in Portland, Oregon. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. Another thing in the housekeeping section, let's see, it's not in my show notes, but I do want to say today, if you're listening to this live, folks in the chat room right now, if you have not seen the ride, the Great Ride, it's on wqed.org/ride. Go check it out. Last day for free is today. So let's see, I assume that they're working on East Coast time, so that means you got about roughly 6 more hours to be able to check it all out. I think it's going to be available for purchase later on, but it's all about the C&O and the Gap, which are 2 trails which are very near and dear to my heart, and well, you'll know in a second why it's important for this episode, but you should watch that. I'm just telling you. So wqed.org/ride. It's really good. Also, I want to talk a little bit about the charts. I've mentioned this before on the show. So sneakily over the course of 160 episodes, this one dopey little podcast about bicycle touring has managed to sneak into charts worldwide on the Apple Podcast charts. So just the other day, this show was the #2 outdoor podcast in, wait for it, India, yes, India, number 2. So that was kind of cool. We've had a little bit of adjustment in some of the others. Jamaica, I'm still getting a lot of love from you. Jamaica, we're solid number 4. That is awesome. Look, number 2 in India, number 4 in Jamaica. I should just end the show now, right? That should be it. Now, remember, we were number 1 in Slovenia. No disrespect to Slovenia, but I'm here to tell you, based on the data that I'm looking at, Slovenia has found approximately 73 other new best friend outdoor podcasts. I'm just going to say that is sort of the most precipitous drop I've ever seen. But Slovenians soured quickly on the show, or just a metric crap ton of outdoor podcasts came out in Slovenia, or something like that, or you only needed 4 votes to get into number 1. Or anyways, I love you, Slovenia. Even though I'm not your favorite anymore. That's fine. That's fine. That's all we got on housekeeping. A light housekeeping episode. All right. Joe Tate. Tate. I can't pronounce anything, but Joe Tate. I'm going to say Joe today says namaste about the India thing, which it's funny. I mean, I assume it's real. I mean, I'm looking at this thing called Chartable that tells you all these things, and it doesn't seem real to me that this show where I just talk into a microphone, it goes around the world, and people apparently listen to it in India, and they're interested in it. Awesome. Okay, pardon me. For some reason, as you know, my voice was shot about a month ago, and in some ways, I'm still recovering a little bit from that. So, of course, drinking beer with logos that are suspiciously like the podcast. No disrespect to New Belgium. They make great beer. All right, let's do the tour announcement. All right, next up on the show is, I guess we'll call it the journal, because the journal is the part of the show where we talk about bike tours, your tours, my tours. This one is yet another bike tour announcement. So one of the great things about this year is I'm looking at having at least an extra tour than what I'm used to. Normally my spring tour is my first one of the season. Of course, in February I was able to go down to Florida, which was awesome. It was pretty short. I mean, it was a 3-day tour. Nothing wrong with that. It was what I could pull off. It was what I could do. This tour is going to be the longest ride that I've done, and I didn't go back to check this, but at least since I did a Portland to San Francisco ride a few years ago. This is a tour that's looking like it's going to be about 14 to 15 riding days, which for me is a little bit on the long side. Just to be able to get away for that long is a little bit challenging with sort of the family dynamics that we have going on here, dog care, helping out, all that other kind of stuff. So 2 weeks is kind of stretching it at this point. But I was able to pull it off. So we're going to be going away for a little over 2 weeks, and the destination, well, I should start off with the beginning destination is right here. I'm going to be leaving the back door. I'm pointing for the folks on YouTube, like the alley is right over here, past the plant. And I'm going to be starting from my backyard here. And I'm going to be going to Cincinnati, Ohio. So why is that kind of exciting? It is, there's a lot of elements and a lot of reasons why I am going to Cincinnati. And it's got a bunch of different orders to kind of tell this story. A few things that prompted this trip. The trip, we'll call 1, 2, 3, 4, it looks like 5 different things because I have it listed in a list there. There's 5 of them, so we'll say 5 things. Number 1 is finances. I wanted to keep this to be a less expensive tour that stretched out a little bit longer. So I wanted to have a distance kind of a tour. So that is a big reason why I chose this. I had some other options out there that included flights and travel and things like that. That's expense that adds up. I wanted to try to make it so that maybe it was just a one-way trip coming back. So finances. Number 2, nostalgia. I'm going to be doing this in a way that is going to be hitting a large chunk of routes that I've already done and like an awful lot. So the other thing is that I'm going to be talking about all routes, with the exception of one chunk, that have been featured on this podcast. So a little bit of nostalgia there. We'll get into who and what those are. I got Brian in the chat room going, already guessing as to one of the possibilities there. Number 3. New to me. Well, I guess I'm going to reveal it right now. I'm going to be doing the Ohio to Erie Trail as a part of this. And not just a little tiny bit of it. I'm going to try to join that 326 club. I'm going to be going as a part of this ride from Cleveland all the way to Cincinnati. So I'm super excited about that. Hey, I even bought the maps, people. I bought the maps. Go support them. Go buy those maps. It helps the folks out who were on the show a few episodes ago. Number 4, the challenge. I think that the interesting element about the ride that I will be revealing in a second is that there are 3 complete through rides of trails. I'm going to be doing a complete through ride from DC to Cumberland, the complete C&O, a complete through ride from Cumberland to Pittsburgh, the complete Great Allegheny Passage, and then I'm going to be doing the complete Ohio to Erie Trail from Cleveland to Cincinnati. So the challenge of doing 3 A-plus trails, arguably the 3 best trails this side of the Mississippi, the Triple Crown east of the Mississippi, at least here in the United States. I'm excited about that challenge as well. So that was the element about all of this that I thought that was really cool. And last but not least is trailblazing, and that's kind of that piece that's in the middle there. These trails don't connect so much. They need a little bit of help, and so I need to get from Pittsburgh to Cleveland. So connecting the Great Allegheny Passage with the Ohio to Erie Trail, I'm doing it in a way that I've not seen it before, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get close, as we keep going here. So again, the route that we're going to be doing here is Chesapeake and Ohio National Historic Park Towpath, the C&O. Starting literally 1.5 miles from here where I'm sitting right now. Cumberland to Pittsburgh on the Great Allegheny Passage, a road route that we'll talk about that in a moment, and that was originally going to be part of the Pennsylvania statewide bicycling system with a caveat, and a couple of fast forwards. I'm going to talk about that in a moment too, and then the Ohio to Erie Trail. And all of that will get me from here in Washington, D.C. to the Queen City of Cincinnati, and that's pretty awesome. As I mentioned, this is a work in progress. Originally, I planned to connect Pittsburgh to Cleveland using Pennsylvania's State Bike Route A. So Pennsylvania's got actually a pretty compelling network of bicycle, I won't call them trails, but bicycle routes. Many states have these. New York State has them, but Pennsylvania has a pretty good one, and I was really excited about it. In fact, Bike Route A is also a part of a connector between Pittsburgh and Erie that the Adventure Cycling Association uses. That was what I was originally going to use. And since it's a state-sanctioned bike route with an ACA kind of add-on to it, you would think, what could go wrong with that? And I'm here to tell you plenty. There is plenty wrong with that connection. And that was what was really the hang-up for me for most of this trip. I looked at all sorts of different options. So Pennsylvania, you got to shake yourself. State Route 51, or I think it's just Route 51, which is north of Pittsburgh. And go check a map out if you don't know Pittsburgh very well. I didn't really know it, even though I've ridden kind of sort of near it on a past bike route. It's a verified death trap, and just go ahead and Google Route 51 and see what the situation is. Pittsburgh people, I know you can get my back that 51 is just an absolute disaster north of Pittsburgh. So that would be the route that one would normally think is good. The ACA says to use it. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania itself says to use it. There is no freaking way that I'm going to be doing it. And it's not a very long section of it. It's about maybe an 8-mile section, but it's just terrible. It's full-on highway with no shoulders and just really no escape routes. In fact, there's concrete dividers. There's not even a place to go to ditch your bike if you're getting sideswiped a little bit too much. So I'm not going to take that route. I did some research and I came up with a few different options. Okay, again, what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to connect Pittsburgh in western Pennsylvania with Cleveland, which is up there on Lake Erie. It's not terribly far. It's a couple-day ride. How do you do it? So there are some trail options that are used by the Eastern Express, and of course we featured that on the show. That's the alternative, which ACA's actually adopted this year. They're actually going to be doing a ride, a Trans Am alternative ride using the Eastern Express. that was one particular option that I could have used, and I took a look at that. Also, friend of the show, Brian Bellman, and I think he's Biking Brian on YouTube. Go check out his videos. He did a really interesting route. He actually did a Cincinnati to DC using what you'll learn in a moment is a different route that looks kind of interesting. Brian's route, I think I would like to do it at some point. And in fact, I'm not so sure if it's an opportunity for the Great American Rail Trail to potentially use, because it hooks up with a lot of rail trails going through the state of West Virginia. The North Bend Trail crosses a good chunk of it. The problem is that this time of the year, it's a big old mud pit. You think the C&O is a bit of a challenge? Check out the North Bend Trail around, until like June or so. So although I'm really attracted to Brian's route, and Brian actually and I chatted a little bit on Facebook, I think I'm going to, I decided that's not the route that I'm going to be going. So that ended up being the first thought that I had, and now I said no to it. As I mentioned, I looked into the Eastern Express, but I decided against that one because I wanted to do the Ohio to Erie Trail in its totality. The Eastern Express route goes much further south. In fact, Brian's route goes much further south as well. And I wanted a chance to get north so that I could get to Cleveland and come down. Now, obviously what I could have done is, if I was going to be going that far south, is I could have ridden all the way to Cincinnati and then come back, but I would have been backtracking east quite a bit. I wanted to, generally speaking, keep going up north, have my general direction be north and west as much as possible the entire time of the riding. Just sort of made sense. I have a limited amount of time. I want to cover as much distance as I can, even though it's not going to be this pure straight shot to the west. So those were the reasons why I decided against the two alternatives that I looked at. So that left Pennsylvania Route A, aka the Death Trap. Not going to be doing that. So I decided to get a little creative. And there is another road that goes parallel. This, by the way, Route A, goes along the Ohio River on the west bank of the Ohio River. There is another parallel road on the east side of the Ohio River. And they got me thinking, is that road any good? And the answer is, it is equally terrible. So I think that's Route 61. So we crossed that one off the list. And then I started thinking, what about my tried and true transit fast forward? And as it turns out, Allegheny County has a good bike system, or excuse me, a good bus system that has front racks on bikes that can get me a good chunk of the way. And when I added it all up and I figured out some kind of routes on side roads, and the parts of 61 that I would be on actually do have shoulders, it turns out that this is the way to go. So what's going to end up happening is that I'm going to be taking a bus from Pittsburgh. It's not that far. It's going to the absolute terminus. I'll talk more about this maybe on a future show, or at least, when you show up for the shows where I actually do this, you'll get more of a picture. But I'm going to be taking a little bit of a mini fast forward to get away from some dangerous roads that will get me to a good spot, and then I'll continue the ride from there. And from that point on, I'll be able to eventually rejoin Pennsylvania Bicycle Route A, and then cross over into Ohio, and it's all smooth sailing from there on some side roads that'll take me through Kent, home of Kent State University, and then eventually up to Cleveland as well. Another potential for a fast forward in there. Once I get to Cleveland, once I get to Kent, I've got the opportunity for another fast forward. And the reason why I would want to do that is because the Ohio to Erie Trail, I would end up doing a little bit of doubling up, and I don't think I want to double it up. Now, it turns out that I've got the time to do it. It's only an additional 35 miles, but that's 70 miles round trip effectively from where I would join up with the trail. So I think I'm going to have to go with a little hashtag not cheating. Take that bus from Kent. Actually, it's from the university itself, and it's a straight shot literally right up to Lake Erie. I would get there at about 7:30 in the morning, and I'd begin my ride from there. So super early to wake up that day if I end up doing the bus option. If I don't, if I'm way ahead of schedule, which is entirely possible, then perhaps I will eschew that and go all bike from that point. So two possible bus fast forwards that are a piece of it. Not very long distances, but in the first instance, to allay danger, and from the second instance, to kind of stop having to ride duplicatively. There's your SAT word for the day, duplicatively. So that would be that. Once I get up to Cleveland, it's the Ohio to Erie Trail the whole way down to Cincinnati. From there, I get a very ill-timed 3:27 a.m. train on the morning, the very early morning after I first arrive, and I'll be going back to DC in one straight shot from there. So that's the trip. I have to say, at first I was sort of, I'm not so sure about this, and then I've gotten slowly more and more into it. One other piece that I want to share about this, I've talked about and I've wanted to do a cross-country trip for a very, very long time, probably since 2014 when I first did the whole Pacific Coast. I was able to pull the time together during that period of time. I don't have the ability to pull 10 weeks together at this point, but I think I want to do it in kind of that segmented way that so many folks do. And so I'm viewing this as part one of a 5-part cross-country ride. And I'm intending to pair 4 other 10 to 14 day rides that will be over the course of the next year or two. And it will basically get me from here in DC to Portland, Oregon. That's always been sort of the goal, is to do that. And that is going to be basically the route that I just described that gets me to Cincinnati. The route that I'm going to be doing, and I won't get into all the connector cities and where the segments begin and end, although I do know where those are. I'd be joining the Eastern Express route and going through Indiana, Illinois, Missouri on the Katy Trail, I will mention that, Kansas, and Colorado. Going through the place, let's see, Fort Collins, home of the place that maybe ripped off my logo. I'm kidding. They did not rip off my logo. So from there, I would hook up with the Trans Am Trail, the actual Trans Am, go up to Missoula, Montana. And then from there, the option to stay on the Trans Am is interesting, but because the Lewis and Clark ACA route can also be picked up right there, I would take that straight into Portland. Straight into Portland. It's like 1,000 more miles or 700 more miles. Anyways, that would be the idea here, that over the course of the next couple of years, I'm going to be doing those segments as we go along here. So anyways, that is another compelling reason why I'm excited about doing the trip in this particular way. I don't have any specific agenda when I'm going to do those other 4. All I know is my goal is to be able to make it at some point in the next couple of years. Will I be able to do it between this year and next year? Maybe. It might take me 3 years, might take me more. I don't know. There may be other routes that I do in between. There's lots of things that capture my fancy. I've talked about circumnavigating Lake Ontario since I think 2013, and I've never done it. So take it as you will, people. One last thing I wanted to mention, and that is meetups. So I really enjoyed doing the meetup in Orlando, and I was like, oh, well, I'm going through all these. I'm going through Pittsburgh, I'm through Cleveland. The problem is that I don't know and can't guarantee when I'm going to be in any of these cities. I have a decent idea, but I also have room to take 0 days because of weather or mechanicals or things like that. And the last thing that I want to do is set up a meetup and then have to cancel because Timmy's chain broke or something like that, right? So I do think, though, that it would be possible to do a meetup in Cincinnati on May 14th. And the reason why I say that is because I know that I'm going to be in Cincinnati on May 14th because my train leaves at 3:27 a.m. on the 15th. So I'm going to be there. I'm pretty sure that night. In fact, I'm going to be there that night, which is why I think that it's going to be possible to, if anybody is cool with this, if anybody is interested, if you're in Cincinnati, or you can magically be there on a Tuesday night and it won't ruin your Wednesday. And I know that's a lift for a lot of folks, but that's going to be on Tuesday night, May 14th. We're going to do the meetup sign up thing in case there's anybody out there. That's pedalshift.net/Cincy, C-I-N-C-I. for Cincinnati, because I can't spell Cincinnati worth a damn. There's so many N's and T's, it's crazy, like C's and vowels. Anyways, so check that out. Hey, there's a Reds-Cubs game that night. I am not a baseball guy by any stretch of the imagination, but if there's like no meetup happening, that's probably where I'm going to go waste about 15 hours, which is, I think, the length of a typical Major League Baseball game these days. So that's a possibility. There's also some really cool places down by the stadium there on the river. The train station's relatively close by. Folks, I'm there until 3:30 in the morning, so plenty of time. Oh, and that's if the train's on time. So We'll just have to see how that all goes. Anyways, pedalshift.net/Cincy if you are at all interested in doing a Cincinnati meetup. And like I said, I know that there's a possibility that that may not be working, but if I've got some Cincinnati folks who are interested in joining, come on down Tuesday night. May 14th in the Queen City. It is the Queen City. Am I right on that? I hope I'm right. I've said that twice. That's just my recollection. The other thing about Cincinnati is, of course, I'm a gentleman of a certain age, so WKRP in Cincinnati. Ever since I've been kind of doing this whole Cincinnati thing, I've got the WKRP theme song in my head. If you are too young to know what that song is, go Google that. Go YouTube that. It's a good one. It's a classic. So anyways, I'm excited. This is the longest tour I've done in a while. I think it's got a whole bunch of things. I talked about those 5 reasons why I think that there's some fun stuff that's going to be part of this. There's some challenges as a part of this. There are elements to this that are going to be outside of my comfort zone. I'm going to be doing some wild camping, I think. It's going to be pretty good. It's going to be pretty good. So that's it. That is the setup for it. I will be doing a more robust preview episode, and I think it's going to be a little bit more about getting prepared for tours in general, but I'll be rolling in the elements of this whole tour coming up in a couple of episodes as we get prepared going into it. So stay tuned for all of that. But DC to Cincinnati, that is Pedalshift Tour Journals Volume 14. It is on. All right, that is the end of that segment, that very bloated, very long segment. Excuse me while I take a sip of the beer here. All right, let me check the chat room here. Let's see. Rob, sorry I'm late. Rob, that is totally okay. Thank you for joining. Let's see. Greg Middlemiss. Middlemiss, yes. We are doing the Ohio to Erie starting May 4th, south to north. Well, it's incredibly likely we will cross paths. If math serves, I'm going to be in Cleveland a few days later than that. So I could see us crossing paths somewhere on the north side, probably, certainly north of Columbus, depending on how fast you're going. So cool. I'll be the asshole with the orange panniers. You'll recognize me. So let's see. Byron Patterson from Oz. Late to the party, yay for the live show. I don't know what time it is, but it's probably 3 days from now. Christian from Denmark. Christian, you're not the... No, Christian, it's Christian. Christian, there's another Danish guy that I ran into years and years ago. His name is Christian Cruz, not your Christian Koford. He was also a Dane, so I was like, oh, whoa, I haven't heard from you in a minute, but thank you. Great greetings and thanks for joining. Let's see. Joe Dete, I'm new to your podcast. Do you go self-contained? Usually, yes. I've only once gone on a tour where I have had support. That was my very first tour. Awesome. If that's how you do it, great, good for you. Is not my jam. Not that I wouldn't do that later on. In fact, February, I did a self-contained one, but it was kind of credit card touring, no camping. And that was fun. But I do tend to go self-contained. I would never say no to it, but it's just not my usual thing. So yes, all self-contained. Chris Barron, I was hoping you were going to be doing the Ohio to Erie. I live a mile and a half off the trail. If you need a place to stay in Columbus, let me know. Hey. Chris Barron, we may be talking. I was planning on camping, but okay, we'll talk. Columbus, Ohio. I did Columbus. I did not know you were from Columbus. Let's see, Byron. Thank you for answering the question, Byron. And let's see, Christian, hello from Denmark. We talked about who, Christian, hello. Jim O'Connor, what bike will I use? Thank you. I did not mention this. I'll be taking the Safari. I'm going to be going with a full-size bike. I'm going to be going fully loaded on this one. I'm probably not even going to do that kind of modified bike packy thing, largely because I want to kind of have a little bit more of the creature comforts on this one. I'm still playing around with it, so I'm not 100% sure, but as I've been playing around with it more and more, I think I'm going to be bringing both of the Ortlieb, the side panniers, and everything like that. More on the preview episode, but yes, I'll be taking the Safari, the full-size bike. I've done the Brompton 2 tours in a row, and I love that bike, and the bike can totally do it. I just don't need it because if I'm taking the train back, I can do the rollerboard service on Amtrak and do the full-size bike, so I'm going to be doing that. Let's see. Greg, we'll recognize you from the Kitty Trail. Oh, Greg, hey. I think you're one of the Michigan... Are you the Michigan guy, Greg? So, yes. Oh, you're the one doing the... Are we going to have a reunion? Okay, well, this is crazy, people. So, Greg, I met on the Kitty Trail last year. So it's entirely possible we may be having another a little reunion on the Ohio to Erie Trail. Oh, wow, that would be funny. That would be really, really funny. That is two bullets hitting each other in midair, my friend. Jeff Hoffman recommended checking out the Rheingeist Brewing in Cincinnati. I am open to all sorts of different recommendations for any place on the Ohio to Erie Trail. My Ohio knowledge is super limited. It's basically all limited to, I went to Columbus on business a couple of times, so I know a little bit about Columbus. I am largely a complete Ohio novice. So if you've got Cleveland recommendations, especially early morning ones, because it'll be early in the morning when I go there. If you've got Columbus recommendations, if you've got Cincinnati recommendations, please, please, please. I will check out the Rheingeist because we got a second there already. Brian, sounds like, who I mentioned, sounds like an awesome tour. Thanks for the shout out. Yes, sir. And thank you for your help. I am intrigued to try your route at some point because I think that you really nailed a really awesome time. Folks, go check out, and Brian, put it in the chat box here, what your handle is on YouTube. I think it's Biking Brian, but Brian's got great videos you all should check out. So feel free to plug yourself there, Brian, because you do some great stuff. Let's see, 14th, check out Hearth Lounge for the meetup. There's a whole bunch of places. If folks give me some ideas, whether you can make the Cincinnati meetup or not, if you go to pedalshift.net/Cincy, there's a spot for recommended places for the meetup. So throw that in there if you've got some ideas as well. I'm super open to ideas. Orlando, I managed to stumble upon this really sweet bar with a bartender who looked like the dude who plays Aquaman. So I mean, it was awesome. That dude was great. Let's see what else. Keith, Tim, when you go through Ashtabula, Ohio, I don't think so. I think, again, Ohio novice here. I believe Ashtabula is not a part of my route, but I will have to check that all out. I know it enough to be able to pronounce it correctly, which, as many of you know, is a rarity. All right, folks, guess what? This is a first for the live show. I'm actually going to be reading one of the mid-roll ads, and I wanted to mention this. You've heard about Hawbuck. You're going to hear the ad in a second, but this is the wallet that I've been talking about for although these many months. It's the sponsor. Ooh, there goes. Don't hold it upside down. It does not hold stickers that way. But I've been a big fan, so we're going to do the quick mid-roll read, and then we're going to go into the show after that. So thanks for putting up with the sponsor support here. Wes, the guy who's sponsor of the show, who runs this company, it's a one-man show. Really cool guy. Wanted to say thank you for that. So here we go. You get to live mid-roll read. I've never done this with people around, so here we go. All right, let's take a quick break and talk about Hawbuck Dyneema wallets. You know Hawbuck. It's a Chicago-based maker of minimal ultralight wallets made out of super strong Dyneema composite fabric. I've mentioned I use the Hawbuck as my bike touring wallet, but I now need to use it as my bicycle wallet, period. So Friday in DC, I decided that because it was spring in a very big way, it was 70s, it was dry, the flowers were literally bursting out of their buds, I was ready to go for a long ride on the C&O. But I could not find my Hawbuck wallet, which was a problem. I had to go with that bulky George Costanza wallet that I talked about on the last time. It's way too thick for my back pocket. I had to shove it in my top tube bag, and I check that bag about every half hour because I'm clearly OCD about losing my George Costanza wallet. But this morning, I found my Hawbuck wallet. It is light and wafer thin. I'm showing it to the audience in the YouTube section here. And it carries just the cards and cash I need in my pocket. And I'm here to tell you, no more rides without this guy right here. Check it all out at hawbuck.camp and use the code Pedalshift. Get 10% off your order. And a big thanks to Wes and Hawbuck Dyneema Wallets for sponsoring the show. Thank you for putting up with the ad read. Let's see. Always happy to take on new sponsors for the show, by the way. Wes has re-upped because there was a good response, and that is awesome. You can go check out sponsoring the show if you've got any kind of bike touring or bike touring adjacent product. Get the details are all there. Pedalshift.net/sponsor. Back to the chat room. Hello, hello. Brian plugged himself. Search Biking Brian on YouTube if you want to check out any of his tours. He's got great stuff. Brian's got some great stuff, and I appreciate his style on there as well. Todd Stillwell. Hi, Tim. I'm planning a self-supported bike tour from Salt Lake to Illinois, Indiana state line in June. This is my first long-distance trip. Is 65 pounds added too much for a month-long tour? That feels like an AMA question. I'm going to save you. Todd, I'm going to save that for the AMA. In fact, you're going to be my first AMA because I feel like that's a good question that I think folks in the podcast can benefit from. So if you will hold off for about 5 minutes or so, we've got one section, and then I will put it in the first AMA. Ask me anything part. So, okay, one more sip of beer. I have to say, it's the first time I had this. I mentioned this at the top of the show. New Belgium Brut IPA. Brut IPAs are kind of a thing. At least lately, I've seen it in some mass-produced beers. Not bad. I prefer them a little hoppier usually, but not so bad, not so bad. All right, next up on the show, we are going to do a real quick segment here because this is a revisiting from a million episodes ago, how many states I've biked in. I think that it was a listener chimed in. Oh, it was Eric Iverson, friend of the show, Eric Iverson from Portland. And he asked how many states I had biked in, so I opened it up for the show. My answer back then, after forgetting a few and having to amend it, was at the time I biked in 15 states, and I've got them listed in the show notes. I added Missouri last year by doing the Katy Trail, and Ohio will be in this year. So I'm up to 16 states right now, and soon to be 17 within the next month or so. I could cheat and cross the river into Kentucky at the end of the tour there in Cincinnati, but that is definitely hashtag cheating. I do not recommend that unless you're really actually I'm going to be biking in Kentucky, which I'm not. Let's see. The other thing that I wanted to add in here was how many states I biked the length or the width of, because that's been a thing of mine I discovered after this Florida tour in February. The answer is 6. I have biked the length or width of 6 states, and I'm including my fine district here, the District of Columbia, which I've done, Maryland, which I've done at its literally narrowest point on the Great Allegheny Passage. That is technically across the state. Is that hashtag cheating? You can chime in. Florida, just did that. Did that right across the middle there in February. Washington State, I did that in 2014. I did the north to south. Oregon, I've done north to south on several occasions, most notably in 2014. California, 2014, did that all the way across. And soon, number 7, the state of Ohio, will be my 7th state that I've gone across or length or width. Very, very close. I did New York State because I did a good chunk of the Erie Canal Trail. But I left out a chunk on the west side. I did not do Buffalo to, where did I start? Batavia. And I did not do from Albany to the Massachusetts line. So cannot count that. But a substantial part of the Empire State, my state of birth. Chat box, folks, jump in. And folks, if you're listening on the podcast, throw in my direction. I'm curious, do we have a champion amongst the Pedalshift community? How many states have you biked in? If you are an international listener and you've never cycled in the United States, I am not leaving you out. How many countries have you cycled in? Let's see. I am, for the record, very lame. I've only done 5. I've cycled in the United States because, duh. Canada I've cycled in. Costa Rica, did a little mountain biking. I guess that counts. France, cycled a little bit around Paris. I guess that counts. And Italy, cycled a little bit in the mountains there. I guess that counts. And I'll be going back again and doing probably some more extensive bicycling this summer when I am in Italy. I rolled my Brompton. This I will not count. I was in, let's see, which airport was I in? Heathrow in London. And I rolled, they folded up Brompton through the airport. That does not count. I do not get England or the United Kingdom for that. So no, I'm stuck at, let's see, what did I say? 5, and I'm barely counting 3 of those countries. But I did technically cycle in those countries. So I'm curious how many places you have cycled. You can chime in the chat box, and we'll do a segment later on if we've got a champion who has beaten me. Let's see, if you've beaten 17 states, I want to hear it because I want to recognize you on the show. All right, let's see in the chat box here. You got to earn Kentucky. That's nasty terrain drivers. Man, I'll tell you what, that's the whole reason why the Eastern Express came into existence. There's just a lot of folks that do not like cycling in Kentucky. But I've also run into people who are great with Kentucky. So, you know, to each their own. I think everybody has their own kind of relationship with Kentucky. Brian, hello, Todd. Been following you on Instagram. Oh, cool. We have community. Community. Looks like I got something on my eye there. All right. Going into the AMA section of the show. And so if anybody else, Todd, I'm going to answer your question first. If anybody else who's in the chat room has a question that you've been saving up that you didn't email to me earlier, I got I got 5 or 6 questions via email that I intend to get to, or hopefully would like to get to. But for those of you who are in the chat box who are interested in asking me a question, and it can be bicycle touring, it can be anything. And yeah, give a holler, give a holler. All right, so, oh, I got to intro this podcast. Sausage making, etc. You guys know understand when I say sausage making. It's like you never want to see people making sausage or doing X. You never want to see people making podcasts, yet all of you show up for these live shows, so thank you. All right, next up on the show is our Ask Me Anything segment, a tried and true section of the live show experience. We're going to start off with a question that we got in the chat box right here from Todd Stillwell. He asks, hi Tim, I'm planning a self-supported bike tour from Salt Lake City to the Illinois-Indiana state line in June. This is my first long distance trip. Is 65 pounds added too much for a month-long bike tour? So Todd, here's the deal. I think that you are almost always, if it's your first trip, I have very rarely run into people who have, on their first trip, at the end of the trip said, you know what, I packed exactly what I needed and it was awesome. There's one guy, literally one dude that I've ever run into who was like, yeah, no, I think I nailed it. And that was a guy that I ran into on my 2014 trip. Ironically, the guy who, and for folks listening to the podcast, this was off air, a Danish guy that I ran into who's got the same first name as the Danish guy who's in the chat box right now. So anyways, that guy nailed it. That guy nailed it. Everybody else that I've ever run into on their first trip rides heavy. And that's a combination of factors. Number one, you just don't know about it. Number two, you don't know how you ride or any of those elements because you don't know until you do it yourself. But number three, you might not have the gear that you may want later on. Now, Christian, the guy that I ran into back in 2014, that dude bought everything from scratch and bought primo equipment. So he was set. Not all of us kind of have that situation. So I throw that out at you. I don't typically weigh my gear, but I would say that I'm quite a bit lighter than 65 pounds. I think that it just depends on what you've got going on here. So I would say the stuff that typically one ends up leaving behind later, extra clothes. You're probably planning on bringing more clothes than you'll probably wear. You will probably end up re-wearing the same dirty, sweaty thing that you have no intention of doing right now, but I'm here to tell you that you are going to be re-wearing that dirty, sweaty thing. And you'll be doing more laundry, or you'll be wearing pre-worn clothes more often. A lot of stuff you can leave back. Some of the heavier things that you're going to bring that you think you'll need in camp, for instance, very frequently you won't. So I would say do some shakedown rides with the full weight. See what you end up using, especially if you're going to be able to do some weekend rides or something like that, and maybe consider paring down. You may find that 65 pounds is exactly what you want, and I would say more power to you. I've seen people dragging trailers around and they're bringing way more gear than that, and they're perfectly happy. They're happy as heck because they're bringing their full-size, pots and pans and things like that. They're cooking up big meals, and that's totally fine. So whatever works for you, works for you. I always talk about at the top of the show, these are ways to ride your ride, right? So ride your ride, but I think 65 sounds a little heavier than normal, I think. So think about that. Look at the kind of gear that you have going on and go from there. But 65 pounds is not without precedent. Lots of people ride that heavy. It's just a question of what do you want to bring? Why do you want to bring it? And if there's a reason, if you're bringing it just because of in case, you may not necessarily need all of that. Todd's actually kind of chiming in a little bit here. Todd says, I did the Katy Trail in November in very harsh conditions and started with 81 pounds. Okay, well, you have dramatically pared down, so that's good. Summer cold weather clothes when in the mountains. I plan to send back when I got through Fort Collins. That is an excellent, excellent way to approach it. If you're carrying a lot of weight because of cold weather conditions, and they're eventually, once you get out of elevation, you're not going to have that anymore, well then, yes, I strongly urge you to send stuff back. My 14 ride, I remember going through San Francisco, I sent back about a 10-pound box worth of stuff. And I've been riding for quite a while, but at least a lot of tours, and that was my longest tour that I've ever done. I still was learning. So, you know, I don't necessarily know everything at all, and sometimes I'll bring stuff that I'm like, I never use, and you know, never be afraid to rock one of those if it fits, it ships kind of boxes with the Postal Service or anything along those lines. So yeah, I think that might be a good way to approach it, especially if it's cold weather gear that you're no longer going to need. Because once you get down from elevation past Fort Collins and you're getting into Kansas, especially in the summer, yeah, cold weather stuff you're really not going to need again for the rest of that ride, because you're not going to be hitting very high elevations, and you're certainly going to be in the teeth of summer. So yeah, having cold weather gear, you're not going to touch it. It's only going to be bulk for you. All right, let's see here. Byron Patterson in the chat box. Tim, can you go over switching away from the padded shorts again? Gross and sweaty topic, I know. I've got a new Brooks saddle and I want to, but damn, is it hard as a rock. Okay, those are two separate issues, Byron. The saddle sores, and this came up, I want to say on Facebook. I feel like I typed this out recently on Facebook, I think it was. For me, I feel like saddle sores and pain down in those nether regions is, and I'll throw this out at the beginning here, is very individualized. We all have our individual skin types and things that create saddle sores. For some people, it's pressure. For some people, it's friction. For some people, it's moisture. For me, it's moisture combined with all of those things equals saddle sores. So what it took, and it took me a very long time to figure this out, years in fact. I was a big into the padded shorts and all of that, and it never really quite worked for me. And then one day, I don't know how I stumbled upon this, but I think I just sort of realized that it was akin to a diaper rash, what I was going through. Again, this is gross, people. But I thought, okay, well, what if I find ways to just keep things as dry as possible? That ended up being the real breakthrough for me. So what I ended up doing was I took a bandana, cotton bandana, regular old cotton bandana, rolled it up like a tube and put it along my belt line. Because what I was finding was, as I was cycling and getting hot, especially on these hot summer days, sweat would go down my back and just roll right down there and right down into those nether regions. And that's just what got things really, really, really moist. And that's what got things bad for me. When I put in the little dam that stopped the sweat from going in there, I'm not saying that it stops things from getting moist down there, but it keeps it drier for longer. I got to the point where I got rid of the padded shorts because I was also seeing that my padded shorts were basically becoming sponges. Again, super freaking gross, but that ended up not being very good for me. So what I've gotten down to essentially is I wear synthetic wicking underwear, and that's it for down there. I don't do any padded shorts. I don't do anything like that. And I get off the bike from time to time and I let things sort of dry out when I take my breaks. And, you know, get the butt in the sun. I mean, again, this is the stuff that maybe you don't want to be hearing, but that worked for me. I know that there are a lot of people that will swear by using a Brooks saddle or by using gel inserts on their saddle or any other type of thing. Use and experiment and do what works for you. But I will say there are a lot of people that like to use, oh shoot, what's it called, chamois cream. And they'll wear a little more like kind of pro racer kind of stuff. They'll wear bibs and things like that, and that works for them. Awesome. Do that if that works for you. But for me, it was, I prefer to wear kind of normal shorts and normal-ish performance underwear, and that's it. I have found that the Brooks is no different, maybe even a touch worse than my cheap-ass stock saddle. And that's because I'm sitting more upright when I'm on the Brooks. That's on my Brompton. I've never put the Brooks on my Safari, the little bit more kind of down position that I have on the Safari. I've toyed with doing it at times, but I'm sort of like, if it's not broken, don't fix it, although I may want to do that. The second part of your question was, of course, the Brooks saddle. How, you know, I would not get a Brooks saddle and immediately start touring on it. It does take time to break in. I would ride it a lot. I would try as hard as possible to break that in long before that. You can use Purified. Google around. There are some folks that have some techniques for how to break it in a little bit faster. I just sort of rode mine, and over time, I would say that it's broken in pretty well. But give it the good care that it needs. It is, assuming you get the leather version, there are actually synthetic versions of the Brooks saddle, which I've heard good reviews of as well. I don't know how it breaks down, if it breaks down similarly to the leather ones, but your mileage may vary on all of that. But I, based on what I've heard and my experience, I would not hop on a Brooks saddle like any equipment. Like, you know, you don't go running in brand new shoes, right? You don't use brand new things. You don't just suddenly change things right before a big tour. Make sure you practice on it. Make sure you break it in with shorter rides, and I think you'll be better served with all of that. So Byron, I hope that helps. The answer is it depends, which is such a lawyer answer. It's my it's the number one lawyer thing that I always say. It depends, because so many things in life depends. Let's see. Jodite, reminder, 30 days of biking starts tomorrow. That is correct. April is 30 days of biking month, so get out there and do that. Wayfarer, hi from Japan. Hello, hello, hello. I used to live in Japan. I need to get back there one of these days. Let's see. Todd, regarding, it looks like the Brooks saddle. Mine took a few hundred miles to get broken in. I don't wear pads. Yeah, that's very typically, folks who are Brooks aficionados, I feel like Brooks people are as big into Brooks saddles as tubeless tire people are into tubeless people. They're like, it's the only saddle to ride on. Not everybody, but a lot of folks. So the real folks. And then they'll be like, I don't have to wear anything. I don't have to wear padded stuff. So yeah, it's possible that your mileage may meet theirs as well. But I do like the Brooks saddle. I just don't personally think that it's the only way to do things, and I can handle being on my cheap ass saddle. Wayfarer in Japan says, I have a Brooks saddle and the rails broke a couple months of use. Very disappointing. I have heard some people have really crazy disappointing issues with Brooks saddles from time to time. It is very much in the minority, but it feels like any product, it's one of those things where sometimes there are just duds in the batch. And if that happened, I would return it immediately, contact the company. I had a really good experience with, who was it? It was the tire, it was Schwalbe. I had a very clearly manufacturer-based error in one of the tires that I had. They swapped it out, no question. I mean, I took pictures of it and everything, and they were like, very few questions asked after that. They just wanted to see what the issue was, and then they sent me a brand new tire. No, it was great. So anyways, yeah. Let's go to some other questions. All right, let's see. This was by email from Joan in Maine. Hi, Tim. Your show is my favorite podcast. Well, thank you, Joan. Just wondering if you have tested or open to testing any e-bicycles. I bought 2 last year to commute to work 46 miles round trip. That is a commute. And to explore longer rides with a second battery when I ride alone. I want to do a week tour this year with my e-bicycle and 2 batteries, enough for 80 to 100 miles a day. Curious if you've seen anyone like this, or if a bike shop has offered to let you test one. And that is, again, Joan from Buckfield, Maine. I am a big fan of e-bikes. I have ridden a few of them in our local Washington, D.C. bike share. I've also ridden them in Seattle, and I think they're really great. Now, those bikes are on the heavy side. They're those kind of bulletproof tanks that are out there. So I doubt that they're built the same way as the bike that you have, which I suspect is a lot lighter and capable, because its range is a crap ton more than those bikes. 80 to 100 miles gets you very much into touring range. I have, on my very first bike tour, ridden with folks who were in recumbent e-assist bikes. And this was back in like 2011, I think. So they were super early adopters. I mean, huge batteries. Their range was not very great. And it looked like it was a lot of fun and very interesting. I personally would love to consider doing a tour. I people do it. I know it's out there. So I would say go for it, especially if you're able to carry a second battery without too much of a hassle. I think that that really gets you going. And, you know, if your bike also is able to be cycled without the e-assist, so many of the ones back in those days, it was a lot of difficulty for them. I was talking to them to cycle without the battery. Once the battery drained down, it was a bit of a tank. The bikes here in DC and in Seattle, if they didn't have the battery e-assist, they would be, they're difficult to ride up hills or really in flats even, because they're very, very heavy. I assume your bike is a little bit lighter. So I think it's awesome. I think you should go for it, and I would love to hear more about it. And if there's any bike shops out there that want a dopey podcaster to try some of this out, hey, hit me up, Pedalshift at pedalshift.net. I would be totally into trying that out for any kind of terrain too. I think e-assist bikes may be the future in some way, shape, or form. I think it's fascinating. Like, I've never done I've done a metric century, but I've never done a non-metric century, 100 miles. I think with an e-assist, I'm sure I could do it. And then you just think about how that opens things up and how I could do maybe a cross-country tour in a little bit shorter of a time. Not that I want to rush it, but, you know, there are stretches in cross-country tours where I want to do 100 miles. I don't want to stop and smell the roses. I want to get to the next town. You know, I'm excited about the prospect for e-assist bikes. So, Joan, thanks for asking about all of that. Next up, what's the latest on the Great American Rail Trail? I think that there's nothing that I've run into other than we've got the reveal coming on, I believe it's May 8th. So a little more than a week from where we're recording right here. And I'll literally be in the middle of the Ohio to Erie Trail at that point, but I won't be far enough south because they're doing an event, as we learned on the show a few weeks ago. There's going to be an event in Columbus on that day, but I'm not going to be in Columbus then. So unfortunately, I'm going to miss that element of the whole thing. I'm anxious to hear more about it. I mean, we do know that we're going to be getting some revelations about the connections between those gateway trails. Perhaps there are going to be more trails that are going to be announced. I'm excited. I can't wait to hear about it. So May 8th, that seems to be the next thing that is coming along here. Let's see. Wayfarer in the chat room. Brooks promises lifetime support, but the nearest customer support is a long way for me. I bought a cheap saddle that has lasted. Yeah. Maybe you can ship it in. I don't know. I think it's always worth reaching out to them. It would be what I would say. Judge, I agree that Schwalbe is legit. We started running Kendas, got some flats once we swapped to Schwalbe, which we had priority shipped to a rest stop. We had none, and that was for 2,400 miles. Yeah, I have gotten punctures on Schwalbe tires, but way fewer than Continentals and others that I've rolled on. I really like rolling on them. I don't think I have a single bike that doesn't have them. They're not perfect. They weigh more, all of that kind of stuff, but I'm a fan. They're very good. Wayfarer talks about Schwalbe Marathon Plus tires. That's literally what I'm going to be rolling on for this tour. I like them, but I find the sidewalls wear out before the tread. Not unlikely. It just depends. You got to be careful, of course. You don't want to run them too deflated, even though you get the hashtag supple life. There's your shout out, Pathless Pedal. All right, let's see. Let's go back to our email list here. From John, why not carry a water purifier on tour rather than a large supply of water in bottles? I'm kind of paraphrasing the question there that John wrote in with. So I think that the number one reason why I tend not to focus on a water purifier is my water source. And we're talking something like the Sawyer straw or any of the Life straw or Sawyer squeeze, excuse me. I have the Sawyer products. Is that, you know, frankly, I'm usually much closer to a tap than I am to a stream. And if I was riding routes where I'm closer to a stream than a tap, absolutely I'd be carrying it. Maybe this tour I'll carry it. I'm going to be doing potentially some wild camping. I'll be in stretches of the Great Allegheny Passage where there's long stretches where it's not super easy to get water. It's not really good for water directly on the trail, unlike the C&O. So maybe I'll bring mine along. It's not that heavy. If I'm going to be riding with full panniers and everything, I'll throw it in. But I found that I literally have not used the one that I have, and it's a couple of years old. So I just don't find many situations where I need it. But if I was on the Great Divide, or if I'm like Mysterious James thinking about doing that Idaho Hot Springs tour, that's a situation where you're going to need something more like that. And yeah, they're light, they're easy, they're great. I did a whole episode, maybe even a couple of episodes about dealing with water on tour. And yeah, they're definitely an option that are out there. So yep, that's why I tend not to carry one, because I'm usually closer to a tap. Let's see. From Christopher. Is there any advice you have about how to advocate for cycle touring or bike packing opportunities where trails already exist, or at least just access to camping? There are some sites along the trails, but they are few and far between where he is. I thought this was a great question. My background in the laws and the laws of advocacy, so what I tend to find is find a local group that's doing it already. Chances are there is a group that's doing this kind of stuff. It might be a transportation group, it could be a cycle club, it could be any one of a variety of different organizations. That would be where I would go to first. And maybe it's a group that isn't doing it right now, but they're aligned with what your goals are. As far as building more camping, I would say that you should consider looking towards Boy Scout organizations. There are on the Great Allegheny Passage, actually, I think that the genesis of all 31 of the campsites on the C&O were all Eagle Scout projects. Now, they've been taken over and they're now managed by the Park Service because it's a national park. But on the Great Allegheny Passage, those are all kind of small regional trails. And any of the free camping sites, those were Eagle Scout projects, I think all of them. And they're all maintained, at least one in particular is maintained by the Scouts as well. So Boy Scout organizations or any other kind of similarly aligned group, if there isn't one, or if you wanted to work with a different group, that's a really good one because they're big into community projects, they're big into camping. It's a lot of Venn diagram overlapping there. So I would check those folks out, and might be a good partner, especially if there's a trail that's going through your area. You've got a Boy Scout who wants to become an Eagle Scout. They got to do a big project. That's an awesome big project to pull off. So, you know, check that all out. Let's see. Byron in the chat room. My big tour meant 48 hours without towns. Yeah, that's because you're in Australia, man. There's like nothing for big parts of that. I'm watching this one kid on YouTube. I wish I could remember his name. I reached out. I'm hoping to get him on the pod. But yeah, he's just doing a huge Australian bicycle tour. Interesting guy. But yeah, man, there's whole stretches of nothing for a while. So yeah, 48 hours. Sawyer was quite useful, Byron says. They can be tricky to fill up. They can be tricky to fill up with the dirty water bag. Yeah, they have a tendency to be a little bit tricky, but there's some good tips and tricks. Go check out YouTube, man. I learn everything from YouTube these days. They're really, really good. Let's see here. Keith in the chat room, who is somehow getting past the closing time at the at the Panera, which he told me was going to be 7 o'clock, and we're at 7:12 Eastern. So yeah, I hope they're not like dragging you out of there, Keith. Tim, have you toured Western Canada? I have been in Western Canada. I have not done multi-day self-supported bicycle touring, as you guys know how I do it on the podcast. I've not done that in Western Canada, with one exception. On the 2014 ride, I took the ferry from Seattle to Victoria. I cycled from Victoria to Sydney, and then from Sydney, I camped up there for a night, and then I took a ferry out back to the States. Does that count? Sort of. I don't know if you'd count that enough for what you're talking about. I would love to do more of Western Canada. I think it's pretty fantastic. So yeah. Wayfarer, from what I hear from Pedalshift podcast, I've heard of that one. The campsites in the US are luxurious compared to what I have found in Japan. Japan, I hear, has excellent camping. I've never done any touring in Japan, but I would love to. This kid that I'm watching, I wish I had his name, but he did some touring in Japan, and he was talking about how camping was really easy for him, but he's a bit of a wild/stealth camper, so that might have been one of the reasons. But I understand camping is fairly decent in Japan. So, but yeah. Anyways, Keith, thank you for the question. He says thanks. So. All right, last question for our AMA, unless anybody chimes in the next minute or two, or 3 or 4. Thomas Gadow asks about C&O conditions, as promised at the top of the show. I think it was somebody was asking about C&O. I'm hearing fairly good reports on the trail itself. We've had a really nice run of dry weather, which ended today because it rained. And, you know, I've ridden on the extreme DC side of things. Parts of that trail, which normally, if the trail's bad, weren't bad. I don't know if that was crazy to follow, but I think that the C&O has rebounded a little bit. Based on what I'm seeing, Preston Page Piper, who's a friend of the show, he lives around the mid-trail area. And from what I've been seeing from him, it's looking like it's doing okay. There's been some great resurfacing around mile markers 25 to 35, which has been a notoriously bad stretch for a very long time. They resurfaced it. It looks great. Pictures look great from what I heard. I have not laid wheels on it yet. The outage, there was another outage around mile marker 64 that was out, and then the bridge was repaired. The one at 52 that's been out for, wow, better part of a year, that is still out. That is probably still going to be out until probably early to midsummer from what I am hearing. There is a way around it. I did a whole video on that. You can go check that out on YouTube. I'll be going through that myself in the not so distant future. The Paw Paw Tunnel descaling project, this is another really good one for you to be aware of. They are going to be reclosing that tunnel again, probably in the next week or two is what I'm hearing. I was kind of hoping that it would be later in May so that I could get through the tunnel without having to go up and over the mountain. But unfortunately, for my effort level, which will take a larger amount of effort to go up and over, although it's easy and possible and people have done it all the time. It does look like that the descaling project, basically they're stopping rocks from falling on you, which is a good thing. So I support it completely, even though I'm going to have to go up and over the mountain in a few weeks. Yeah, so it's going to be closed for at least the spring and possibly into the summer. It's unclear from the Park Service site. So that would be what I would say. There's also some little minor detours here and there on the trail. And when I say detours, man, we're talking for a few hundred yards. They're not that big of a deal. When that Potomac River leaves its banks, man, you know that big slack water can close down. There's all sorts of parts of the trail that when there's flooding, stuff happens. The bad news, Capital Weather Gang, as I like to call the weather nerds around here, this is the blog that the Washington Post runs. They are awesome about knowing what the weather conditions are going to be. They're predicting a rainy, wet next 4 to 6 weeks. So that means that the possibility of flooding is higher. That means that the trail's going to possibly get a little bit more waterlogged again. Last year was a total washout. It was the wettest year, I think, in my certainly in the entire time I've been cycling the C&O. But if you look at the data, it looks like it was one of the wetter years for a very, very long time. And the trail really suffered as a result of it. This is the first year in a while that I didn't do a full through ride. So I'm very much hoping that if Capital Weather Gang is right, they're always right, that the sogginess of the trail is ameliorated a little bit by some of the resurfacing work that they're doing, and the fact that it's had a little bit of time to recover through the winter and for the last few weeks. So that's what I am hoping. Semi-related note, you didn't ask about the Great Allegheny Passage, but I'm going to say it anyways. Big Savage, the tunnel that is closed throughout the winter, was reopened on Friday. So now the gap is completely open from Cumberland to Pittsburgh and back again. So that's really, really great. And of course, I hear all sorts of good things for all of that. So let's see here. I want to go back to the chat room for folks. Let's see. Wafer was talking about in Japan, no showers, no power, no Wi-Fi, no hot water. Yeah, very primitive camping in Japan. But you know, hey, that's all good. And let's see. That is basically it. Hey, ask me anything. I didn't get any non-bicycle touring questions this time. It's a first. Well, anyways, folks, I want to say thank you for coming into the Ask Me Anything section here for this episode. We'll be doing another live show coming up, probably in the summer. Okay, and that will end the podcast of the show. Let me take a sip of the beer here. All right. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your great questions. Thank you for participating. This was, I think, I'm pointing at the number here, I think that we are at the high water mark for any live show that we've ever done. Not saying that it's an enormous group of folks, but it's awesome that it keeps growing every single time. So thank you so much for joining. It's really fun to do these. I am probably going to be looking to do these at least on a quarterly basis and maybe every other month. So between 4 and 6 a year, I think, is where I'm going to settle in on it. I think monthly is a little bit too frequently, but if there's like super huge demand for them, hey man, we'll go for it. But I think that this is just a lot of fun. So this show will be episode number 160, which will be dropping in the feed on Thursday at 7 a.m., same time, same bat channel. Same bat time, same bat channel. See, it's not funny if you don't do both of them. And yeah, and then we've got some really, really cool stuff coming forward to you in April. Of course, we've got, let's see, a whole slew of things. The newsletter that's going to be going out in the next couple of days is going to have a rundown, because I have it all kind of set out, I think, if I'm not mistaken, for the April shows. So if you're not signed up for the newsletter, I would really strongly encourage you for that. A couple of reasons. One, you get kind of previews of what the episodes are going to be going ahead. Anytime I've got something special to share, I'll do a special mail out. I usually don't do more than a couple, 3 emails a month. And that's usually, hey, reminder, live show tonight, you know, that kind of a thing. So sign up for the newsletter over on the website. And yeah, that's it. So everybody in the chat room, thanks so much for joining. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for being a part of this extravaganza we call Pedalshift Project number 160. We will see you in a couple months, and stay tuned. We got some really fun things coming with this tour. I'm very excited to be sharing that all with you. As always, it's going to be a big bunch of content for May going into June, basically probably leading all the way up to the Podcast Palooza ride in Portland. So it's crazy how this all pieces together. So everybody,